All right, everybody, welcome back to the Pro Physique Code, and we're going to get into the topic of why are you stuck and how do we break through those plateaus? What do we as coaches do when nothing's working? How do we keep fat loss moving, right? Because I think it seems like logically it's very easy, but that's why not everyone's a coach, and that's why not everyone's lean, because it doesn't always add up to what you think you should do. And before we dig into that, we've got two things to announce. First things first, 2 weeks left. I don't know when this video is going to come out, so maybe a week and a half left for the 90-day transformation challenge. Kicks off February 12th. We are allowing late signups, but you'll be at a disadvantage if you sign up late because everyone else already have their starting pictures and they'll be off and running. But we're giving away $25,000, nutrition plans, training plans, open worldwide. So if you guys are looking for some motivation, private group support, we're also doing discounted coaching rates through the coaches at Pro Physique. Those spots are limited and they've been filling up. So reach out, let us know if we can help you. But mostly let's just make 2024 amazing, right, guys?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then now, if you guys are interested in a more hands-on experience and you're a female competitor, our Command the Stage event, the last weekend of February, is a month away. This is something I'm super excited about. We're doing it in downtown Tampa. Beautiful time to be there in February, but everyone you see here will be on there, along with some of the other coaches for Pro Physique. We've got a superstar on the rise, Ariana Brothers. She's going to be there helping us out. Daraja Hill, Whitemoyer is going to be there. Of course, Brett Contreras will be there as well. So it's just going to be a 3-day event where we go over kind of the science and the, specifics of contest prep, everything from nutrition, training, into posing, suit selection, hair, tan, makeup, mindset. And also we're going to go over the key exercises for the female divisions and how to execute them. That's why we love having Brett there. You're never going to find a more passionate person around exercise science. And then we're all going to train with you guys. So it's really, I think we got bowling set up for one night. We've got some social events.
Favorite. Yes, the bowling place. I think we're doing it at the same place we did it before.
Pins? Is it Pins?
I think so. The place there's only one.
You live down there. It's not too far from where you live.
Is it Splitsville, right?
I'm gonna be
Splitsville.
walking.
That's it.
Yeah. It's right where I live. I'm gonna be walking everywhere. So besides obviously drive to the gym, but yeah, Splitsville. Yep.
That's ironic, Evan. Splitsville. Anyway, all right, let's get into the podcast today because I really want to figure out what you guys do when your clients hit a wall. So how should we approach this, Lexie?
Okay, well, it is definitely I feel like this is, I don't know, I think this is one of my favorite parts of coaching. Ironically, I think it's kind of fun to be able to crack the code, so to say, because it's always different for everybody, right? So I think there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration when somebody seemingly hits a plateau. And I think the first thing that we should kind of start off by identifying is what is a true plateau? Because I feel like a lot of people get it confused, like what a true plateau is. Some people think, oh my goodness, weight didn't move for 1 week, I've hit a plateau. And I don't know about you guys, but that is certainly not a plateau in my book. And in fact, you may think you've hit a plateau just because your weight hasn't changed or moved. But, if you look at the other data, if you look at maybe your measurements or you look at your pictures, you may notice, oh my gosh, there's indefinite changes there. So even though the scale hasn't moved, you've progressed in other areas visually, and that's not necessarily a plateau either, right? So I don't know about you guys, do you have any definitions of what you kind of define as a plateau as far as, all right, amount of weeks where just either all progress has stalled, meaning weight, measurements, body composition? Do you guys have a time that you would say this is a true plateau?
Take it away,
Yeah,
Evan.
Paul. Well, for me, it really just depends on the person too. And that's why working with people for extended period of times is really helpful. Because everyone's body reacts differently. Some people's bodies in prep really get started off with a fire and just start burning right away. People kind of lag behind just a bit. So, it depends on if they're doing everything right. I think that's the first part of it. People kind of do 85% of the plan and wonder why they don't get 100% of the results. So if everything is locked in, they're doing everything right, their food selection's good, their meal timings are good, their digestion's good, their cardio's on track, their training is good, all that is good. If it's been, 2-3 weeks on that, I'm like, okay, we need to probably do something. Especially, depending on how long the prep is with that. But first things first is making sure that they're doing everything correctly. The second thing is making sure that they aren't in their heads and stressing about it 24/7, because that can happen. And the third thing is, are they actually plateaued? Because a lot of people will look at their weight one day on check and be like, I'm the same weight I was last week. It's like, well, no, you actually aren't, because your weekly average is down like 2.5 pounds. So you're not the same weight that you were last week by any
You see
means. It's
that
probably
all
inflammation, water weight, something like that that's stacked on top of that. So I wish, just like everything in this sport, it kind of depends on that. And it's person individual.
right. I would kind of agree with you though, when like you kind of said that like 2, 3 week mark, and that's if like nothing is moving, like measurements. There's maybe no difference in pictures, no difference in weight. But you brought up a good point. And I think it's important to talk about, the average weight of the week. It matters much more than just what you woke up and weighed in on check-in day. In fact, I always explain that to my clients. I'm like, hey, this is why I want you weighing in daily, because weight is going to fluctuate. And if you're just weighing in once or twice a week, you're kind of holding yourself back in a way, especially during prep, right? It's just less data we have as coaches. So I don't know. What do you think about what's your definition of a plateau, Paul?
Yeah. So from my perspective, and I think that's what's really the difference between coaches, is I only at this point focus on competitors, right? So my definition of a plateau is based on the timeline that we have, right? If I have 4 weeks, I'm not going to wait to see if things are happening. I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive with my adjustments and making sure we're ready ahead of schedule, versus if we're 24 weeks out and we're just starting and the scale maybe didn't move, but so there's 4 points that really determine for me if I'm going to make a change or not. The scale is one, pictures are another, measurements are another. And then I love to ask people, are you noticing any changes? Are your clothes fitting differently? Did you see a new detail in the mirror? Did somebody come up to you and say something? Because our bodies are mostly water, and I don't think we fully understand the dynamic of how water reacts in our body. There's this theory, and I don't know how true this is, but I heard it years ago, and it makes sense in our situation, that because we've all noticed this before. We look leaner. We're like, man, I can visibly see more detail, but the scale has not budged. And then one day you wake up and you're down 2.5 pounds and literally nothing changed. You didn't get more sleep. You didn't get more rest. It wasn't inflammation. So there's this idea that fat cells, basically fat cells, they never go away. They just basically shrink to zero when you lose the adipose tissue on the inside, right? So there's this idea that perhaps the adipose tissue has left the cell. It has been used up for fuel, but that fat cell retains some hydration for a period of time, anticipating that adipose might come back, right? We don't understand all this stuff. So that would mean that actually you have less body fat, but your fat cells have not lost that size, right? And so imagine if a lot of these fat cells release this fluid at a similar time. We call this the whoosh effect. Again, I could be way wrong here, but I've just seen it so many times, literally thousands of times. You've seen this. My clothes are fitting better, but the scale's not budging. Coach, I just happened to a client of mine named Amanda this morning. She messaged me and said, Coach, we finally dropped on okay. I could see it in the pictures for the last week, and she was getting antsy. Can we ramp it up? Can we ramp it up? And I said, yeah, by the end of this week, if we're not seeing progress, we'll ramp it up. So it's really down to the timeline that you're on, how much body fat we're talking about, right? So if someone has a lot of body fat to lose, that should be moving a little quicker. The less body fat you have to lose, the less you're going to see change from day to day on the scale, the more you're going to see change visually. And this is really where technology has allowed us as coaches to be much more efficient and effective, because we can get posing videos, we can get in-gym videos. Obviously update photos are much easier because you can just do screenshots from a video that you're shooting. So technology has really allowed online coaching to go to that next level. And before anyone says what they're about to say, but I look so much better in person than I do in my pictures, we all know that, right? I know as a coach, when I see something in a picture, when I go see that person with my own eyes, they're going to look way better but you still know the look. When you look good as a prep coach, when you look good in normal, terrible update pictures, that's when you're going to look good on stage, right? So it's not an illusion. But there is like this difference between how you look in person and how you look in update pictures, unless you're working with Gilco on your update picture. I don't know. You know, they're really the only people that I've ever seen capture like true stage video, like Evan's stage video. That's actually how he looked. So it's just, we're not there yet with the, I guess, the technology for
Yeah.
daily pictures. So you have to understand that as a coach. But yeah, like a lot of it is, you know, getting feedback from the person. Are you at a plateau? You know, because they'll tell you, coach, I just feel the same. Nothing's happening.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I always actually address first when it comes to if maybe we've hit a quote unquote plateau is I always like to ask about digestion. Because if digestion is really slow and it's not moving, it can certainly cause that scale to just stay stagnant. And it can also cause, like, if somebody's not going to the bathroom, it can kind of cause their core to look a little washed out, right? So visually, it may not look like they're changing, the scale isn't moving. And so sometimes that's usually the first thing I like to address. And then if they tell me, oh yeah, digestion's fine, going to the bathroom every day, everything's smooth sailing there, then I can move on from that. And then, maybe we revisit things like a refeed or a diet break if needed, depending on how long they've been in that fat loss phase. But I think digestion sometimes convinces people that they've hit a plateau and really they haven't. So that's where I like to go first, is just troubleshooting digestion, because there's no way around the fact that for most competitors, I would beg to even say like all competitors, there comes a time in prep where your digestion kind of slows because you're eating less food. So it's very important to keep that in check, so that way your weight can consistently drop. You're going to the bathroom and you're not having that like washed out kind of core appearance.
Yeah,
I think, go ahead, Evan.
one thing too, when it comes to the pictures and in person, um, I heard a long time ago, and it just really stuck with me. It's like, if you can look great in bad lighting, you're going to look great on stage. So that's always something you look at. Um, I think too, it's really helpful for competitors to have consistent lighting as well. With that, that's a big thing. And one thing, I hate to have to say this, but please don't edit your check-in pictures, because then you will look better in pictures than you will on stage. So please don't do that. Please just send it raw. No one cares. We don't care if your makeup's done or your hair's done or anything like that. Trust me, we don't care. It doesn't make a difference. We don't even look at that. So,
Yeah, honestly, the most important thing with update pictures from my perspective is consistency in lighting, background. You know, sometimes I'll get a picture from a client. Hey, coach, didn't have time to take pictures this week. And they'll do like a selfie in the gym mirror. Great. You look great.
I don't know what I'm supposed
You
to do
look
with
great
that.
after you worked out in the gym with a full pump, but can't see your physique. I need to see it at the same angle. You know, preferably I like to set my clients to set their camera up at waist height, which is about where a judge is going to be looking up at you, with the same lighting, the same outfit. And, that way you're comparing apples to apples.
Mhm.
So yeah,
That's so important. I would say the only time I can really justify like a different setting for progress pictures is like for clients who travel in their, in a hotel room. But I usually feel like those clients, they have a good setup, and like they'll bring a ring light with them, or like a portable like phone ring light, and their pictures are usually still fine. But it is very important to keep your lighting consistent, keep the setting consistent, keep what you're wearing consistent too, whether it be like the same posing suit every week. Like, don't wear something drastically different every week, because I know that's a minor detail, but that can definitely make your physique look a little bit different.
yep.
For sure. Just like everything, consistency is what breeds results. It really,
Yep.
really does. And again, it's consistency with everything, right? So if your digestion starts getting thrown off, it's probably because you changed something. So what
Yeah.
did you change for the digestion to get thrown off? Like, think about these things, right? And it depends how the client's being coached, right? If they're in a macro-based plan or meal plan or whatever that is with that. There's just different variables to throw in there. And that's what we do as coaches, right? Is to help pinpoint those variables. And just like not saying, like, you don't know what you don't know. And that's what we're here to help with the clients with, is understanding these types of things and helping them on the psychological side. Like, if their weight isn't moving, or if it's actually moving and they don't think it's moving, if their pictures are different, whatever that is, getting that information across to them, and then troubleshooting with it, right? Troubleshooting with it. And You can typically tell too, if someone sends in their pictures and they're not moving, and they're like, "Yeah, I just seem stuck," and they're not like frustrated at all or anything like that. A lot of times, my little lizard brain starts working, be like, "This person's probably not doing everything they need to do, and they're aware of it, and they know they probably just need to do a little bit better." I don't
Yeah.
know if that's conditioning from some experiences I've had in the past with it, but um, yeah, it's understanding if you're actually at a plateau, and then if you're doing everything consistent, what we need to do to get over that. And it could be pulling back, right? It could be
Yeah.
pushing harder. And that's where understanding the body and understanding the client and really understanding that client is a big deal, right? Because if you understand that a client and we've all got those clients that are like 100 miles an hour, right? That no matter what, they are busting it, right? And if those people get stuck, sometimes you realize you need to pull it back. And then you have other
Yep.
clients that really not necessarily or as driven to the goal as some of the other ones are. And then it's probably we need to press a little bit harder. So that's where understanding the client and working with the client. It's not just understanding the client's body. It's not something I say. It's like, well, I can understand your body better. It's like I understand you better.
You understand their
Yep.
psyche better. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about some actual tangible things that we can do. Um, so let's just say a client has been on a plan for a couple of weeks. They've lost a few pounds. Things are not moving. We all agree. Client agrees. We agree. The coach agrees. Okay, we're at a plateau. The first thing we're going to look at is calories in, what's your daily activity like, and then we might look at some other factors, right? Um, but that's the first step. Okay, guys, your body adapts. When you have less body fat, you require less energy to maintain it. And when you do any form of cardiovascular activity over time, your body is going to become more efficient. Now, that sounds like a great thing, but efficiency means you require less calories, right? You burn less calories doing the same cardio, and your body requires less calories to maintain its weight. So, this is when we must adjust the plan. That can be as simple as dropping some calories, adding a cardio session, adding intensity to a cardio session, adding length to your cardio sessions, adding steps to your daily routine. But the one thing that I think early on as a coach, and when I say early on, I mean like 10 years ago, I always felt like, oh man, I don't want to take more food away. I don't want to add more cardio. But what really helped me understand that was the fact that I've gone through this process so many times as a competitor, and I got excited when I got adjustments. We are crazy people. We When we hit a plateau, I don't look at that as like, oh no, I've hit a plateau. I go, sweet, I know what to do. Let's adjust the plan. And now we're going to get things going again. So I think understanding that if you're in this to lose body fat, add muscle, change your body composition, the idea that change is necessary gets you excited. So as a coach, I no longer look at that and go, oh no, I have to take away food. No, I look at it, I'll go, this is what the data is telling me, it's time to do that. And this is just another week to gather more data. So if we make an adjustment and things happen, then we're excited. If nothing happens, it's just more data. And I think that's really the first line of offense going after fat loss is, okay, if our activity level and our calories are not producing the result we want, we've got to look at what we can do to augment that to get things going again.
Yep.
Mm.
I also send out I have different questionnaires I'll send out at different phases of different people's plans. Like if we're in a building phase or a diet phase or contest prep phase, whatever that is, I have a certain set of questions I like to ask, and I'll start sending it when things start happening. If we start getting kind of stagnant, I'm like, okay, I need you to answer each one of these questions for me each week. And then part of it too is like, all right, if we need to press harder, which would you prefer? Less food, more cardio, or
Yes.
like give me both of those? Like it really, like I feel fine, run me into the ground sort of thing. Now, obviously, I don't do that, but it gives me a good idea of where their mind's at. And
It
that's the
gives me that
biggest
that
help.
that really reminds me of like that initial phone call. That's why I always
Mhm.
ask everybody what their job is, what their daily routine is like. Because
Mhm.
if someone's a personal trainer and they're walking for 9 hours a day, adding cardio might be the worst thing you can do for them, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it is very important that you go, hey, can you handle more? Because giving somebody an hour of cardio that's already on their feet for 9 hours a day might not be as effective as just pulling back some calories. It takes no extra time to eat less. So
Mhm.
understanding someone's schedule is important. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and it's some people just don't have the time, right? I'm not saying they don't have the time, but they could make the time, but so many aspects of their life is going to be impacted by that. Their stress is going to go through the roof because they have an extra hour on top of that, and they can barely get through their day as it is, right? Their sleep is crap. They got kids running around the house. There's only so much you can do, and understanding that is helpful, and not just necessarily for adjusting the plan, because it could not be just adjusting the plan. It could be adjusting the whole game plan. Like, let's not do this show. Let's push it back to another show with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You can only do what you can do, right? Like there's no magic to this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it is very important for us as coaches to know what our clients' lifestyles look like what their job is. Are they sitting at a desk all day? Are they on their feet all day? Because also, going back to the whole time thing, some, like you said, Evan, some people just, it's not that they don't have the time, but it would just be very inefficient to add more cardio on their plate. It would stress them out. It would do more harm than good. And that's where in some cases, like if I have a client in that situation, we're kind of already at like that max level of machine cardio, and we're already eating a pretty low amount of food. Sometimes I'll just beef up like their step goal, right? We'll just, because it's a little bit easier to get that in very passively throughout the day, or we'll take their cardio up a notch, just, increasing intensity if I feel like they're not at a plateau because of inflammation already, right? So those are kind of two areas that you can play around with without necessarily adding too much stress, or extra time that they have to do cardio. So that's something I like to do from time to time as well.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that's why, our update system, which is proprietary to our company, it's evolved over time. I didn't, the data that we collect, it's not just what's your weight, it's not just what's your pictures, but we're asking for sleep scores, hunger scores, scores of wellness that allow us to kind of dig in. So if we look at someone and we go, okay, the update came in, they're not losing weight, their hunger's at a 9 out of 10, which is very hungry. Their stress level and sleep levels are elevated, sleep levels being dropped. Sometimes the best thing you can prescribe is a couple days off, a couple of days of recovery, a couple of days. This is one of my favorite things to do. I want you to take 2 days and get caught up on all your stress, laundry, kids stuff, work stuff. Get caught up on that stuff, because that, especially, don't take offense to this, Lexie, especially women. I notice that women can compound their stress, right? For me, I can have lots of stressful things, but I saw a video the other day and it described it perfectly. Men's brains are like a chest of drawers.
You
We
said this
open one.
before on a podcast
Yeah.
that I remember. I loved it. Yes.
Yeah. And it's funny is that it popped up on my feed the other day. It's an old video. The guy describing the way the brain works for men. It's like opening up a drawer on a chest of drawers. We open up one box at a time. We play, do whatever we need to do in the box. We close that box, never have two boxes open at the same time. Women, their brains are wires, all tingled together. And so they're constantly, and I confirm this with my wife, and it's exactly how she feels at the end of the day. Whereas I'm like shutting my brain off to watch, you know, a movie or a TV show. She's just starting to think about all the stuff she didn't do today that she's got to do tomorrow. And then, so the best thing you can do sometimes for that situation, if you're in prep, is just get all that stuff done. No one feels better than when the house is clean, the laundry's done, all the chores are caught up, all the bills are paid, and you just have that sense of like calm. I mean, doesn't happen often, for for some people. And so if you can give them the freedom to go, okay, I know you're in prep, but I need you to take a day for yourself. Go get your nails done, go whatever. I've just noticed that can have some really positive downstream effects. So yeah, it's not just fat loss management. Sometimes it's, you know, as coaches, we'll all agree, sometimes it's life coaching, life management, understanding how to like manage your time.
Absolutely. And I would say the cases, especially like deep into prep, where we kind of hit a quote unquote plateau, a lot of times that's just because of stress, like stress in life or stress, like just cognitive stress. And so it usually does come down to, okay, what can we do to manage this stress a little bit better? Whether it's a day like you just mentioned, Paul, or we bring in refeeds, or maybe we decide, if we have the time to do so, we do a diet break week. So yeah, a lot of times those plateaus deep into prep are brought on by just stress cognitively or physically on the body.
That's
Beautifully
why
said.
when I have my first initial phone consultation, I tell them my number one rule with working with a client is please be honest with me.
Yep.
If you mess up,
Yeah.
if you fall off plan, if anything like that, look, I'm not going to get upset with you. I get upset with you if you tell me you're doing everything right and then we're not. Because then it's frustrating because I'll bang my head against the wall trying to figure out why something's not working. And when it's really this, they aren't doing what they need to do.
Mm.
Um, and it's look, there's sometimes we have to have those like come to Jesus tough talks, right? Like, hey, all right, we can't mess around anymore. We need to start pressing this, but we can't have that conversation if the information I'm getting is not accurate. And I will always say this because I utilize Google Sheets and they'll fill out the information too and send it over and I'll take a look at it and I'll say, first of all, thank you for being honest with me here, but
Mm.
you know we need to do better than this.
Yeah.
And they're like, thank you. And those clients always do well because they understand they're not making excuses. They're like, hey, I screwed up. All right, let's get back on this. And you know, and so I find out a lot of times when plateaus happen, it's either obviously it's one of the basic things, right? Like are the food is too high, or their movement's too low, or something is going on with that. Um, but sometimes it's a little bit deeper than that, right? But if we can get the plan locked in and if we look at something and we're like, how is this not working right now? Then it's time to check in with the client and make sure they're checking all those boxes correctly.
Absolutely. And something I want to preface, I don't feel like I should have to preface this, but I think it's important is that if you're a client and you hit a plateau, like make sure you're still checking in with your coach. I know that some people think like, oh, so nothing's happening, I shouldn't check in, but like, no, you need your check in even more when you've maybe hit a plateau. Check-ins are not a time to always just sit there and celebrate. Oh my gosh, what amazing things happened this week. Like they're also a time to sit down, evaluate, okay, what may have went wrong to make sure we can keep moving forward, right? So even though as a client, it may be, I've had some clients before like say, oh, I feel like I'm disappointing you. We're not seeing, the results we should be seeing, but that's okay. That's what I'm here for, is to help you to troubleshoot that. So I cannot express the importance enough of continuing to check in, even when things aren't happening, things aren't moving. You're not disappointing your coach. In fact, it disappoints me even more when people don't check in, right? So you need your check-ins even more when you maybe feel kind of stuck or down about your progress.
Let me ask you guys this, because I realized something when Lexi said that is over, over the years of coaching and the competitors, I feel like the people who get stuck, and they say, I don't want to disappoint you. I feel like most of the time that happens, it's when people aren't doing what they need to do. Have y'all kind of experienced that same
No,
thing with that?
no,
No?
but again, I always say my perspective is always skewed because
True.
after doing this for so long, the people I get to work with are highly motivated. They have found me because they've heard me talk. They know my philosophies. I'm not trying to convince them that I know what I'm doing. So I tend to get very hyper focused and talented individuals.
True.
Um, so I do have, people tell me like, "Oh, I don't want to let you down," but that to me all comes
It's
down
different.
to the initial call of like, you can never let me down. You can never bother me. You can never, sometimes I'll get, coach, I know it's Sunday. I don't want to bother you. And I always say, like, first things first, you can never bother me. If I don't want to be bothered, I won't look at the messages. If I'm with my kids or my family or we're doing something, I won't reply. So feel free to message me. And thank you for asking, because that allows me to do my job better. So yeah, like think that also comes with that, it comes with that initial call, and you build that trust over weeks and months of
Yeah.
weekly check-ins. And I think the video replies is something that's been very helpful for me, because before video replies, that wasn't even possible 6 7 years ago. There were no video tools. If you wanted to send a client a video, it was like record a video, upload it to YouTube, send them a link. That was a pain in the butt. I tried that for a while.
Wow.
Now you've literally got point, click, and shoot options for sending videos to clients. That's really cleared up a lot of the confusion between, the client and the coach, because they can hear your voice, they can hear your tone. And again, Lexi, not to beat, a dead horse here, but females would message me back and be like, "Hey coach, are you mad?" I'd be like,
Mhm.
"Why would you think I'm mad?" "Well, you made changes, but you were very short with me." I'd be like, "Well, I'm
I
just
can
concise."
100% attest to the fact that I am that female. Like I overanalyze everything. I'm not afraid to say that. And even when somebody, like even texting people, sometimes if they're just like not using any exclamation points or no emojis,
See, see.
I'm
You got
like,
to use a smiley face, Paul, and
And men
exclamation
don't
points.
use emojis. We
no,
don't, I mean, literally.
I've learned you, Paul, but that's where my mind always goes. Like, I'm like, oh
Yeah,
my God, is this
he's
person
mad.
mad? So yeah, I think a lot of females are like that.
And that was a valuable learning lesson for me, thinking, I was thinking initially like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna send every client a video every week. This is gonna change my workflow. No, it's actually made my workflow much better because I can be like,
Easier.
hey, great job this week. We're gonna make an adjustment, but I'm really happy with where things are. So I kind of think it helps them get into my mindset of why I'm doing something. And I've started actually posting them to my Instagram stories. And I got a great response from it. Every now and then I'll just send a video to someone. I'll be like, you know what? There was a lot of cool info in there. I'm just going to literally screen record that and put that on my story. I've started doing that. Because sometimes I don't have time to make content. So I'm like, well, maybe I can double dip here. But I'll never say the client's name or anything like that in it, but just, hey, we're reversing. This is what we're going to add this week. This is why, just information like that. But yeah, there's the communication of the client coach with the plateaus is invaluable because you can glean so much off of little things they say. Hey, coach, sorry, this week was rough. The kids were sick. I had to work overtime. I hit my numbers, but I didn't make, and you can be like, okay, I don't really want to make an adjustment because this week stress was high, right? So I can tell like, and maybe we just do a 3-day follow-up. Hey, I just want you to get a good night's sleep 2 nights in a row. And then let's catch up again and see where you're at before we make an adjustment.
Yeah, that's important. I think like if somebody hits a plateau but their stress was really high one week or as a coach, a lot of times we don't even really need to make changes to the actual protocol like number wise with food or with cardio. It's just a matter of okay, let's get better at managing the stress this week. Like I had a
Yep.
client who checked in this morning. I think she was down and she's got a pretty small frame too. So this was pretty significant. She's down like pound and a half, 2 pounds on average for the week. And we didn't change anything last week. But she was like last week, she was sick with like a cold. She was coughing a lot. And that can sometimes draw inflammation to the body. And she was kind of stressing because her weight had went up, but I'm like, we're not going to change anything. And what do you know, just let alone like that variable, her not being sick, inflammation coming down. We didn't do anything with food or cardio and she's down in weight this week. So, and I think one thing I want to dive into as well, that I think a lot of people would be curious to hear our perspective on is like refeeds and diet breaks and kind of when to know when to pull back as opposed to when to push, right? Because I think if it was as simple as approaching every plateau with, okay, we're going to push harder with cardio, we're going to push harder with food. I mean, at the end of the day, not a lot of people would need coaches, right? But it's not as simple as that. In fact, that can hold a lot of competitors back when they get deep into prep, especially when you get that laser focus. Like that's why I think it's so valuable. Like that's why I could never prep myself because it's hard when you're deep into prep being told, okay, we need to actually pull back to move forward, right? As a competitor, you think, oh, I want to keep pushing. I'll do whatever it takes. So I think it's important for us to talk about kind of that approach when we get that deep into prep, like what we look for as coaches when it comes to, okay, we know we need to actually pull back as opposed to push the client.
So there's a couple different phases to this. So I don't start prep off with refeeds, right? I don't take a client that's starting a fat loss phase and add high carb days in. High carb days for me only start getting added when their daily carbohydrates aren't kind of restoring their energy, their digestion, and for every person that's a little bit different. But, if we're getting anywhere near your body weight in carbs, that's where I start to have some alarm bells, right? So, let's say you're 150 pounds and we're at, 130 carbs a day. That's when I start to go, okay, it might benefit this person to have one high carb day a week, right? The leaner you get, the less body fat you have, the lower your carbs get, the more I'm going to start looking at multiple refeed days. Now, if we hit a plateau where we're having multiple refeed days, something else might happen. Coach, I didn't lose any weight this week, but after my 2 refeed days, I was actually down just a bit. And then I go, okay, there might be something here. This is where a diet break might be helpful, which is a extended refeed, if you will. So yeah, those signs for me are all about making sure that we're making significant progress before we add in a refeed day. If you start off prep diet for 2 weeks and take a diet break, you're not going to make any progress, and I hear, the banter on the internet of the research. Oh, diet breaks proven ineffective. And I'm like, not so fast. It's proven ineffective. A, if you have too much body fat. B, if you haven't been dieting very long. However, I will say hands down, the greatest addition to my box of tools as a coach is a diet break. It extends an athlete's season. It improves the post-show experience. It improves the performance on stage. It literally restores everything you would want to restore. It's going to improve the relationship with the gym, their physique, their hunger signals, their sleep, their digestion. And I call it like a slingshot. It's like you're taking a week to just kind of reestablish where you're at, and then you're just going to be off like nothing. And there is a little bit of an art to that. It's not as simple as like, you're checking this box, checking that box. And sometimes I'll even kind of trick people into it because they get a little nervous. So all day, okay, I want you to follow this for 2 days. I'm going to bring your cardio down to this. This is your macros. I want you to follow this for 2 days and check in. Oh, hey coach, 2 days later, everything's the same. I feel good. I'm still a little tired. Okay, let's do 2 more days. Check back in. Cool. Hey coach, actually funny. I'm down a pound after. Okay, keep cardio down. Let's add another 30 grams of carbs. Okay. And so I've tricked them into like a little mini diet break, reverse diet. And by the end of it, I've actually had people do that sometimes. I mean, it's rare, but 2-3 weeks in a row where we can reverse and keep dropping weight. So there are these toggle switches that I think most people aren't aware of. And the caveat to that is it's not a break from dieting. The term diet break is a little bit misleading. It's literally just a break from being in a severe deficit. You're just coming back up to a maintenance number. And competitors, they're going to do it. If I tell a competitor to eat 50 grams of carbs more, guess what they're going to eat? 50 grams of carbs. I don't have to worry about them going out and being like, well, coach gave me a diet break. I guess we can go out and have a couple beers and a pizza tonight. That's not at all. They're more scared of eating more. So they're super diligent.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. There's And it's what the purpose is of the refeed, or not the refeed, but a diet break or refeed, or however you want to refill, their rest and their recovery. That's why we ask for so many biofeedback markers like sleep, digestion, stress, all that type of stuff, right? Because it can play a role with that. But also too, it's typically one of those things that if you need a diet break, you've been pushing for a little while too. This isn't something like if you got a 110-pound girl that's at 215 grams of carbs a day, and she's saying, oh, well, it's like, I'm just so hungry and I'm so tired. It's like, well, I don't know what you want me to do. You're on 30 minutes of cardio and 215 grams of carbs. It's like, it's kind of part of the game here at this point. Like, your food is not low, your movement's not high with that. So let's look at some other options on things, because I can promise you in cases like that, raising the food is not going to end well in that situation. So it's, again, understanding kind of what the client is mentally, understanding, what the overall goal is. And again, the timeline, right? So I think what Paul said is smart by saying like, hey, do it 2 days here, check in, 3 days here, check in, rather than just saying, hey, let's just do a break for a whole week. Because if you do that and it's not good, you lose a whole week. And
Yeah. The timeline
you
again
got a
comes
week
into
to lose.
play.
Yeah.
Honestly, the mini diet breaks, the 3-4 day ones can sometimes be just as valuable. You don't need a full week sometimes. So, but that's coaching. That's paying attention, and I've talked about this all the time, but like Lexie, when you're in prep, towards the end of prep, we're talking 2-3 times a week, sometimes daily, so it gets very hands-on at certain points of the process. And that's not for the general population to be that dialed in.
Yeah, because that's the approach I take with my clients too. Like when we're deep into prep, like I remember this past prep of mine, Paul. I mean, there were like deep into prep, you're telling me, okay, here's the next 2 or 3 days, check in after that, right? And we're monitoring things really, really closely. It's kind of like that push-pull effect. And that's typically what I do with my clients too as they get deep into prep. There's just a lot more variables to monitor. And a lot of times, like we don't have that time, at our leisure to just wait a week before checking in, right? So Yeah.
Well, let's talk about
It's
what can be problematic in prep, because this is something you guys all come across when we have consultations with people that have, taken approaches to fat loss, either self-inflicted or through coaching, that, low calorie approaches, high cardio approaches can actually create a problem. Um, I think there's this idea that carbohydrates are fat storing. It's not true. Carbohydrates are actually required in the process for the body to use fat as fuel. So, my favorite saying is fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. So don't fear carbs. Um, Also low fat dieting. Sometimes I'll get a meal plan from someone and I'll say, all right, well, let's plug this all in to a macro tracker and let's just see where we're at. And come to find out, for 6 months, they've been on a low sodium, low fat diet. Well, low sodium is actually a problem. Okay. If you're not getting enough sodium, that is going to cause some problems. That's actually been associated with insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance. Who knew? Sodium is a transport for glucose. So you combine these things with high cardio, high stress. Sometimes they're adding in, let's call it exogenous hormones or exogenous things to aid in fat loss. And now you can get a situation where the problem is actually the body just starts to shut down digestively, hormonally, and you compound these problems over weeks and months, and you put the body in a compromised position metabolically. The person's mentally fatigued. And so for that reason, we as a coaching staff kind of have some thresholds where we get, anytime I have a female get to 35 grams of fat a day, that's when I'm going to basically pump the brakes a little bit. If I have to push this person harder, it's going to be in the form of more activity. I don't mind more activity, but I find when you go past these thresholds with macro ratios, you're going to run into some problems that are going to be compounded when the diet's over.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
listen, if it worked,
that
I would do it. I've tried it all the ways. I'm not opposed to being as aggressive as anyone can be when trying to win. But when I've allowed clients to tell me like, hey, coach, in the past I did this, and I go, okay, well, let's try that. I see the results, right? And this is why I don't really compromise on my approach, because although you may get a short-term benefit switching to a different approach that is, outside of my comfort zone, I'm going to follow your journey. And when you're 30 pounds over stage weight and you retire from competing and you say competing is the problem, I'm going to also be like, no, it's not.
That's,
That's the
I
approach.
mean,
yeah.
that's the key, what you said right there. Like some of these extreme measures, they work in the short term, but I think that's where, as an athlete, I personally think one of the best qualities you can have is that delayed gratification, right? Because it's really easy to do something in the moment that maybe works in the moment, but then you have to deal with the repercussions later down the line, post show. And like you mentioned, it's a scenario like you just mentioned, Paul. So yeah, it's all about remembering that delayed gratification is important for your longevity in the sport and just long-term health in general.
Yeah, and yeah, everything has to be looked at post show too. Like it really does. And if we have to push food down like really low for a few days, okay, but it's not something that you want to do for extended periods of time. Shoot, I've worked with some people that have burned like 800-900 calories for 4 or 5 months, right? Like crazy stuff like that,
Oh, a
and
year. Yeah.
nuts, right? And then afterwards, their digestion is just destroyed because they're not even used to eating food, much
Yeah.
less eating like, what people would call like normal food, right? So when you even start trying to introduce some of that stuff back in, it's just welcome to just digestion hell. And you are going to feel miserable. Everyone around you is going to be miserable. And then you're going to end up resenting the sport because of that. And it has nothing to do with the sport. It just has to do with you got linked up with, unfortunately, someone who didn't think about the post show side of things. Or I won't even say you don't think about the post show. Maybe just don't know, right? I don't always know what the deal is with it. But it's more about, again, the number one rule, just care, right? Care about the person before and after the show, because number one, their experience is going to be better. Second, they're going to feel better and probably perform better. And they're just going to have a good experience. And that's the part of it. Most people are not going to walk in their earlier shows and just dominate this sport. It's a long chess game, right? It's a long game. And you got to think about it like that. Because if you just torpedo yourself to try to just be the best you could ever be at your second show, that's not going to go well. And it'll probably be your last show. So,
Yeah. That mindset, the you know, I've noticed the people that have success the fastest in the sport leave the fastest.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
they always
People that walk in and win overalls at their first shows,
yeah.
typically it's not, it doesn't end well for them,
I like the
unfortunately.
Either that or they have to take a break. I find that
Yeah.
like, you know, you start to get this expectation like I'm going to win, and the first time you don't win, you're like, whoa, hold up. You know, whereas the competitor that had to place in their novice class, then they finally got a placing in an open, then they finally won an open, then maybe they win an overall, then they go to nationals, get second call outs, then they get top 5. You know, it's like this journey.
Mhm.
Whereas the competitor that I have had, you know, a couple that have literally done their first regional show, won overall, went to nationals, got their pro card, did 2 pro shows and retired because now it's hard, right? So yeah, yeah,
I like
and
the quote that says like fast, and this isn't everybody, but this is I think very generalized, but like fast success builds ego, slow success builds character. And I think that kind of applies to that concept we were just talking about. Of course, it doesn't apply to everybody, but I think it's a good kind of quote to take to heart.
100%, a hundred
And it's not
percent.
necessarily even like athletes that we know and we coach, right? Like it's I can't tell you how many shows I've gone to over the past few years and seen girls win overalls, be like, who is this person? And then never see him again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Never see him. I mean, because and they'll do their little speeches afterwards, be like, oh, I've been prepping for a year, and like, it was really hard. My food's been low, like 2 hours of cardio a day, all this stuff, like for a year.
Well, and this is where you
Like,
find
yeah,
out
you look good for this show,
how much
but
people in the sport matters to them, because
when
when
sometimes
you're
that
in
they
prep, the
get pushed so
motivation's
hard.
high.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they get pushed so hard, right, for so
Yep.
long that they, as soon as they have that little bit of life back, it's they don't want to go back to it, or
Right.
they go so far overboard, it's hard for them to get back because they were pressed so
Well, and
hard
that's
for so long.
my early coaching experiences, and I even made a video called this in like 2017, I think, called the prep diet. What people just expect prep is. So I've heard people be like, "Yeah, I loved competing, but I couldn't handle the diet." And I was like, what is the diet? I don't know what that means." Oh, you know, like this, everyone's on this diet, and it's like a meal plan from a coach from 1986 that's been handed down through these shitty coaches that, you know, they just kind of reformulate it and make it look good, but it's, you know, 900 calories and an hour of stairs and egg whites only and no soda, you know, like these. And I'm like, well, yeah, like who could survive that? That's not the prep diet. I have the bad news for you. Like a lot of us prep eating the foods we enjoy. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that serious. And so I think sometimes there's this stigma that you're not hardcore enough if you're not doing it as hardcore as possible. And that hardcore approach, it's binary thinking, and it's great, cool. You really showed what you can do, but you also are going to dread ever doing it again versus, you know,
Exactly.
a
Exactly.
Most
sustainable
people,
approach.
yeah.
And also, I mean, I think it is that athletic athlete mentality of like wanting to, be as hardcore as possible. But in this sport, like the judges don't like when they see you on stage, they don't care what you did to get there. Like they're
Right.
not gonna reward you because you were, the most hardcore with your food and your cardio, right? Like that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So why should you put the pressure on yourself to go so hardcore, like put yourself on a pedestal for that?
There is a big personality thing there. And I
Yeah,
think some
I
people's
I understand
personalities,
it.
it's just easier for them to go switches on, boom. And I even get a little bit that way towards the end of prep. You know, for me, it's like a funnel. At the beginning, I'm including eating out and more foods. And then towards the middle of prep, I'm like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't go out to eat so much anymore. By the end of prep, I'm eating the same 9 foods. I'm getting to bed at exactly the same time. And I become this like hyper focused individual. So for that reason, I'm not ever going to be someone that competes like for the whole year. I'll just do my little couple shows. But I also, during that funnel phase, I feel like I become a more efficient, better version of myself. There are times when I'm like, man, I am crushing work. I am crushing family time. I am hitting my macros. I'm crushing my workouts. Like you become very efficient. Now there does become a time where the balance kind of tips towards, okay, now you're being cuckoo. Now you're doing 2 hours of cardio, and you're weighing out your food 4 times. Like there does come a time, but guess what? That's who wins. Like that's,
That's it.
that's who wins. And so there is a point where every good competitor is going to be like, tell me what to do. I'm putting my goggles on. I'm going to win this show. But it doesn't need to be 2 years out from a show that you're cutting out sodium and you're not allowed to have mustard. that's where I go, like, you guys are a little bit crazy pants. You know, these things are not going to make or break you in a year from now. Like, you know, so pay attention. So let's finish with this, because the idea here is we're talking about how to break plateaus. Let's get into a little bit of the end of prep. Things aren't happening. Calories are low. We've taken a diet break. Because I've got one other strategy that I've come to think of as, the other coaches are doing it, why not me? Right? Where I go, you know, I see the plans that these other competitors are on. They're willing to basically die on a hill to get a pound leaner. And so I had to look at that and go, okay, well, maybe I should be doing some semblance of this. But I've found a way to do it and reap the benefits without having the issues long term. So the approach that Evan was talking about, where someone's on 800 calories and no fat for months at a time, I've learned that if you employ these strategies for short periods of time, pushing, with a short period of time of recovering, pulling, you get a wonderful benefit. Okay. Because sometimes you're just not making progress on 1,300 calories and 60 minutes of cardio. And this is where coaching people that want to be champions, you have to be willing as a coach to go where they're willing to go and just see what they're capable of, and not hold them back based on your limitations of what's good and healthy. And this is something that it took me the longest time to learn. This is where my clients have gone from being successful to being the best in the world. And it's being comfortable as a coach going, hey, listen, this isn't working. We need to go into, hell week. I call it hell week, or I call it, just let's just get after it. And I'll tell you, most people get excited for it. Well, they go, this is it. We're going all in, right? I know Evan loves this phase. He self-coached last year and he probably stayed in it a little too much. But tell me your thoughts on like that idea.
No, that's exactly the way I look at it. There's barriers we don't want to go under for health reasons. You can pretty much do a lot of things for a short period of time without having a negative impact on you. You can drop stuff really low. You can push people really hard as long as you allow them to have some recovery with that. It just can't be, you can't slam the pedal to the floor the whole entire time. That's not going to do anything. You can't do that. People are going to fall out mentally and physically with that. But if things aren't happening, you do everything the way, we normally try to get things done, and things aren't happening, they understand that too. The client's like, well, I need to get farther. I need to get better. I want to be better. And they're willing at that point to do it. And because we haven't done this for months at a time with that, their energy's in a better spot and they're able to do it when it's needed to be done. It's not just a tactic you pull out to start. Like you don't just see a fly on the wall and pull out a shotgun and shoot it. You don't do that. Like you have to be smart with your choices. And sometimes you need to. Like sometimes you got to slam that down. And again, it's like Paul said, if somebody wants to do something, they feel good to do it. That's why I sent out the questionnaire. And the last question on my questionnaire is, give me all the pain. That's the last question on there. And I would probably say 75% of the people I work with check that box each week. And I'm like, we're not doing that. But it's good to know where their head's at, right? And
Right.
again, it's also making sure that they're comfortable with it and that they understand they understand the game plan with this. Like, this is not
Yeah.
a permanent thing we're going after here. Like, this is not going to be fun. This is going to be hard. You're going to probably hate it, but find joy in it. No, this is for a short period of time.
Well,
And you're
listen,
going
I
to reap
can,
the benefits.
and that's where you, me, Lexie, I know we almost get like excited for that at the end of
Yeah,
prep to go, oh, this is the last bit. This is the
let's
hard
go.
part. But this is where, if anyone's ever dieted down to stage weight, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you have, like, dropping a pound at the end of prep is way more impactful than dropping the first 15. You literally see just an immense amount of detail the last couple pounds of prep. versus the first 15, 20. You're just like, am I even dieting? Like, depending on, now I'm talking from me and Evan's perspective, who are men over 200 pounds, for women, a little different scale on the number there. But the idea is that the last 5 pounds of prep are probably more impactful than the first 20 or 15 of prep, right? So it can also, and this is where you have the phone call and you go, hey, do you got a couple days where you don't have much to do, where we can like drop the calories, you can suffer, we can increase the activity, you can just literally make your life for the next 72 hours about prep.
Yes.
And they go, cool, let's do it.
Yeah, I find that weekends are, I like to have that discussion with clients too. Like usually weekends are a good time to take advantage of that, or like a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday when maybe they have those 2 days off of work and they can just 24, well, not 24/7, but like eat, live, breathe, prep for those 2 days and not have to stress about like work in the mix.
Well, I'll explain my protocol. So I'll give you guys like some insight into something that I like to do when I call it Hell Week. This is what I like to do. I'm going to drop their carbs pretty minimally, probably half their body weight, right? So if they're 120 pounds, they're getting 60 carbs, right? This is just ballpark figures. Fat's going to drop to maybe 30 grams, maybe 25, but again, just for a couple days. Cardio is going to be 2-hour-long sessions. I don't love the stairs on these because they are so grueling that I love incline or elliptical, low impact, but breaking a sweat. So now you've got extremely low calories, extremely high activity. The caveat to that is I tell them you're not allowed to sit down.
Yep.
And they're like, what do you mean? I go, well, go to the zoo, go to Disney, go to the mall. You're not allowed to sit down. You can take a break, but I don't want you doing your cardio in the morning and then sleeping all day, doing cardio at night, and then that's it. No, we need to use this as a chance to burn. And if you can find a way to keep your mind busy.
Uh-oh, did we lose him?
Yeah, I think he's faded out here
I
with
know.
that.
Okay. Glad it
I
wasn't
will
just
make I'll make one comment on the stairs that is absolutely correct. Well, at least my outlook on it is, if you're pushing that low on food and you're pushing cardio up high, you can't push stairs for 2 hours. Like, you can't do that and not sit down. Like, your body's just going to stop working. Like, you're going to say get up and move. People, like, they're going to stand. They may not sit down, but they're not going to walk. You have to be able to pick out the ebb and flow on that. And Paul, you dropped out. That's why we were talking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of figured as much. But the idea of the stairs, I think everyone loves it because you do sweat intensely on the stairs. And I'm not opposed to using them at times, but you really got to pay attention to your recovery.
Paul, didn't you know sweat equals fat loss? Didn't you know that?
There is some truth to that. That is thermogenesis there, that is beneficial, but there's also inflammation. There's also other factors.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
like the stairs only when I will notice in prep sometimes if I do too much walking, I'll start to get like blisters on my feet. Like it'll be just uncomfortable to like that repetitive walking notion. So doing the stairs can help with that. But yeah, the stairs can
It's
become
also
more.
why I like the elliptical, because it's more of a circular, less impact. So yeah, actually Maria Nemeth, one prep, I gave her free reign over one weekend. I think we had to drop a couple pounds and it was getting close to stage. And I said, just do as much walking as you can this weekend. And she checked in with like a sore ankle and we had to switch to the stairs. Yeah.
I think I remember seeing that. Yeah, on her story.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh crap, did I just ruin Maria? But she recovered.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I'd say she did pretty good because she turned pro that season. So
Yeah, Maria's a beast. In fact, very excited for Maria. Congratulations. She just got engaged.
She
oh, I
did.
did see that. Yes.
Yeah. So
That's
we'll get to celebrate with her at the command the stage. We'll get to see her fancy ring.
That's so funny because I think back to like, what was it, a month or two ago? We had our company-wide meeting and Danny Krishka was like, wait, I thought you were married, because her and her fiance have been together for like, what, 8 years?
8 or 9
Long
years.
time.
Yeah. They've been together a long time. Yeah. So yeah, and they live together, the whole nine. But us men, we tend to drag shit out.
Oh,
Just a lot of effort.
Maria.
My wife still gives me shit that it took me 5 years to propose, but I'm like, well, if you didn't push me, we'd still be just living together.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Well, I think that's a good way to end it with breaking plateaus. I think this was a lot of good information. I think, you know, again, it still comes down to the specifics of the individual, but I think as a coach, not putting limitations on, you know, the big picture for me is not putting limitations on what a person is capable of, and also not getting so caught up in, you know, feelings, trusting what you see, trusting what your client is telling you. Coach, I'm not making progress. Because, you know, that's something that I've had to really learn. And here's another hint, and hopefully some of my clients are not listening right now when I say this. But if someone checks in with me and goes, you know, coach, I know we made progress this week, but you know, I think I could go a little bit harder. I'm going to do it, because to me, they're just looking for that approval, right? Now I'm still going to monitor and make sure that we're not doing too much too soon. But same time, if like Evan said, when you've got that energy and you've got that motivation, just let them go, get after it.
Edge of it, yeah.
Is that Maleha?
It is.
She's on the podcast. Tell her she better check in.
I will.
All right, guys. Any other things you want to add?
I don't think so. Just share this episode if you enjoyed it. Tag us. You can always reach out to either of us too for topic requests, because I know we've gotten some good topic requests too, and we always like to take those into account.
Yeah, the year's kicking off now, so I think we're gonna be really good on like ideas, because we're all checking with clients that are in prep, starting prep, you know, ending prep, whatever that is. So yeah, I'm excited about getting this year started.
We got to get Sandy on. Sandy Williams.
Get Sandy on. I talked to Joe Pashkula. He wants to come on.
Good.
So yeah, I think it's probably a good idea to get Sandy on early in the year before the year gets going.
Yeah, before she's traveling. Yeah, definitely soon.
Well, she just did the Flex podcast, so I'm going to wait a little bit. But I listened to that podcast. That was more about kind of her journey and her understanding of like the women's divisions in the sport and how. So, you know, when we get her on, we're going to talk specifically about probably the bikini division for the most part and its evolution. I think, you know,
Cool.
I've got an interesting history with Sandy, some fun stories that I've never told her, you know, that I think that'll be fun.
Cool. I love
That'll
it.
be fun.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Have an awesome Tuesday. Go kick ass. And yeah, Lexie, get a cat. Okay.
Bye, guys.